They see an artist, 36, living in a minimalist loft in Austin. Alone, that's the surface. A quirky woman with a failed startup, they think. My brother, Mark, actually said that last week at dinner. Still playing with that VR stuff, Ava? He said it with a pitying smile. He's a VP at Sterling & Sterling, the family firm. He's the golden boy. I just smiled back. Yeah, Mark, still playing. Inside, I was calculating the quarterly earnings of Sterling Ventures, my other company. 900 million. Last quarter, my phone buzzed, an invitation. The annual Sterling family reunion. Shit, this year's theme? Celebrating family success. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had no clue I'm Ava Sterling, and I oversee a tech empire. A $10 billion empire, give or take. Behind a carefully constructed facade, I built it. And it's about to blow up. They're running a piece on me in Forbes, 30 under 40 tech visionaries. They're about to find out what I've been playing at. The memory is a knife. 15 years ago, the Sterling family home, sprawling, manicured, suffocating. I was 21, fresh out of design school, buzzing with ideas. I'd built a rudimentary VR prototype, a simple game environment. I believed naively that I was on the cusp of something huge. This is it, I'd announced at dinner, my voice trembling with excitement. My VR business, Sterling Visuals. My father, a man whose handshake could crush bone, took a sip of his scotch. Ava, darling, he began, his voice dripping with condescension. That's cute, but what about the family firm? My mother, ever the peacemaker, chimed in. Stability, dear, you need stability. Sterling & Sterling offers that. Her smile was too sweet, her eyes too knowing. They saw a flighty artist, a dreamer. They didn't see the code I'd been obsessively writing, the potential, the future. Mark, already a rising star in the family business, smirked. Yeah, Ava, real world versus virtual reality. The collective dismissal was a slap in the face. Then came my father's ultimatum. Join Sterling & Sterling, or no more support. No more funding, no more anything. That night, I made the hardest and most exhilarating decision of my life. I walked away. I packed a few bags, moved into a tiny apartment, and started building. I took odd jobs. I ate ramen. I coded for days, fueled by coffee and a burning desire to prove them wrong. I found a small, anonymous angel investor. I incorporated under the name Sterling Ventures. The first few years were brutal. I was constantly hustling, pitching, failing, learning. I'd call my mother, pretending to struggle, knowing she'd relay my plight to the family. The pity was a fuel. It was the fire in my belly. Then came the breakthrough. A new rendering engine. A killer app. The money started flowing. I bought up smaller VR companies quietly through shell corporations. I leveraged AI algorithms. I perfected user experience design. Sterling Ventures became synonymous with immersive technology. I watched, detached, as Mark would present at tech conferences, unknowingly touting the very products I developed. Chloe would casually mention her investment portfolio, oblivious that her smart investments were my company's stock. The layers of deception felt like a shield, a necessary evil. The secret was a burden, but it was also my power. I remember the first time I saw my father at a charity gala, years later. He looked at me, a fleeting flicker of something was it pride? In his eyes, before dismissing me as Ava, the artist. The sting was immediate, sharp, but the seed of something bigger, something vindicating, had been planted within me. Now, it's all about to change. The Forbes article is a ticking time bomb. I can feel the tremors, the anticipation. The carefully constructed house of cards is about to collapse, and I'm ready. I have been for years. The Forbes article was the catalyst. The Forbes team had been persistent, promising a profile that would redefine industry standards. They wanted the untold story, the visionary, the reclusive billionaire. They didn't know how right they were. I'd given them carefully curated information, just enough to pique their interest without revealing the full scope. They thought they were getting a glimpse. They were about to get a flood. Sterling Ventures controlled 65% of the global AR/VR market. We had 3 major subsidiaries, each worth billions. Sterling Immersive, focused on enterprise solutions. Sterling Games, a behemoth dominating the online gaming sector. And Sterling Labs, the research and development arm, pushing the boundaries of haptic technology and neural interfaces. My personal net worth? Just shy of $9.7 billion, according to my private wealth manager. I owned controlling interests in 7 other tech companies, all strategically acquired through a network of holding companies and offshore accounts. My influence extended beyond the tech world, too. I had quietly invested in renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and space exploration. I was on the board of 3 nonprofits, again, anonymously. My network was vast and meticulously crafted, a web of contacts that spanned continents and industries. I even funded a scholarship in my own name with a deliberately vague description of my philanthropic endeavors. The irony of my daily life was almost unbearable. I'd sit at family dinners, listening to their pronouncements about success, while silently calculating the revenue generated by Sterling Immersive's latest project, a VR training platform for surgeons that was projected to bring in $500 million in the next quarter. I'd hear Mark lament the challenges facing the family firm. Oblivious to the billions, I was investing in cutting-edge AI that would soon make their outdated business model obsolete. Chloe would casually dismiss my artistic endeavors, while my company was revolutionizing the way people experienced entertainment. These moments fueled the fire, adding another layer of satisfaction to my quiet victory. I enjoyed the subtle power of withholding, of knowing something they didn't. I remember the board meeting where we discussed the Forbes article. My CFO, a seasoned professional who knew the full extent of my empire, raised a concern. The potential impact on our stock price, Miss Sterling, is substantial. I smiled, a small, tight smile. Substantial was an understatement. I had already instructed my legal team to prepare for the inevitable lawsuits, the opportunistic investors, the sudden demands for interviews. The carefully laid groundwork was ready. The Forbes article was a masterpiece of understatement. It painted me as a disruptor, a visionary, a self-made woman. It mentioned my humble beginnings and my passion for art. But the numbers, the metrics, the sheer scale of my achievement were undeniable. The company valuation, the revenue figures, the market share dominance, it was all there. The day the article dropped, the phone calls started immediately. Chloe was first. Her voice, usually so confident, was shaky. "Ava, is this real?" she stammered. Mark, predictably, was furious. "What the hell is going on, Ava? Why didn't you tell us?" The call was short, clipped, and filled with accusations of betrayal. My parents? Silence. Then, later, a carefully worded email from my mother, filled with expressions of pride and support. The subtext was clear: they wanted in. They wanted a piece of the empire they had once dismissed. I orchestrated the aftermath with cold precision. I granted a few carefully selected interviews, controlling the narrative. I assembled a team of publicists and crisis managers. I even allowed Mark to consult on a minor project, just to watch him squirm under the weight of his own inadequacy. Chloe, after a period of flattery, started demanding meetings, asking for investment advice, and hinting at a partnership. The power shift was immediate and decisive. The family dynamic, once dictated by their expectations, was now governed by my wealth and influence. I reveled in their awkward attempts to reconcile their old perception of me with the new reality. It was a sweet, long-awaited victory. But a strange, hollow feeling was also starting to grow. The annual Sterling family reunion arrived, a meticulously planned event at the family's sprawling estate outside of Dallas. The theme this year, chosen months prior, was family success, celebrating our legacy. A glossy brochure, featuring a smiling portrait of my father, Mark, and Chloe, detailed the schedule: golf, a formal dinner, and a speech by the family patriarch. I arrived late, driving my electric Porsche up the long, winding driveway, the car's sleek design a stark contrast to the traditional architecture of the house. I parked near the back, avoiding the valet service, wanting to observe the scene before entering. The air buzzed with forced conviviality, the sounds of laughter and polite conversation echoing from the open patio doors. I walked through the grand entrance, the polished marble floor reflecting the opulent chandeliers above. The house felt familiar, yet alien. This was the landscape of my childhood, the source of both my deepest resentment and my greatest ambition. The rooms were filled with familiar faces, relatives I hadn't seen in years, all of them, it seemed, staring at me with an odd mix of curiosity and apprehension. The Forbes article had been out for a month. My father stood by the fireplace, holding court. Mark hovered nearby, his face a mask of forced cheerfulness. Chloe was surrounded by a group of women, her voice rising and falling with practiced charm. I saw the precise moment my mother noticed me. Her smile froze, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. She excused herself from her group and glided towards me, her silk dress rustling softly. "Ava, darling," she said, her voice a little too high, a little too sweet. "We were just wondering where you were." "Traffic," I said, my voice even. I looked past her at the room, at the people. They saw me, finally. They saw the woman behind the artist, the quiet architect of my own extraordinary fate. I was about to offer a polite greeting when Mark strode toward us, a forced smile plastered on his face. He clapped me on the shoulder a little too hard. "Ava, didn't expect you to show, must be pretty busy these days." I looked at him, then at my mother. The game was about to begin, the final act. I took a deep breath, the crisp air filling my lungs. "Actually, Mark," I said, my voice calm, measured, "I have a few announcements of my own." The words hung in the air. My father turned, his face a mask of surprise. The room went silent. The stage was set. The performance was about to begin. "Mom, Dad," I continued, my gaze sweeping over them, "I've been meaning to be more transparent about my current ventures." I paused, allowing the tension to build. "As you know, my work has been primarily in the VR/AR space." Chloe, who had been chatting with her friends, now edged closer, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and calculation. She had a way of sniffing out opportunity, a predator sent for the vulnerable. "It appears the Forbes article has made that a little more public." I gestured towards the article's image displayed on a large screen, strategically placed for maximum impact. It was a bold move, but I wanted them to see it, to internalize it. I could feel the shift in the room, the sudden weight of their attention. My father's face, usually so stern, was now a study in confusion. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Mark, ever the pragmatist, recovered quickly. He forced a smile, though his eyes betrayed a flash of envy. "Well, Ava, congratulations. That's quite something." He clapped again, a little less enthusiastically this time. "Thank you, Mark," I said, my voice smooth. "But there's more, much more." I took a slow, deliberate sip of my champagne. The bubbles tickled my throat, a strange contrast to the electric current running through the room. "As the article details," I continued, my voice gaining a new level of authority, "Sterling Ventures is currently valued at nearly $10 billion. We're the dominant player in the VR/AR market." The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. The air seemed to crackle. My father's face contorted. He was struggling to reconcile the image of the struggling artist with the reality of the billionaire. "10 billion?" he finally stammered. Chloe's jaw dropped. Her carefully constructed facade of sophistication crumbled. She looked like she'd been slapped. Mark's face, already flushed, turned a shade of crimson. The golden boy was suddenly overshadowed, and he knew it. He started to stammer, but you're an artist, a designer." "I'm an entrepreneur, Mark," I corrected him gently. "And I'm also the majority shareholder in a number of other companies, including, I might add, a fund that, among other things, has made some very successful investments, some of which have benefited the family directly." I met their gaze, one by one. My mother's expression was a carefully crafted mask of surprise, and was that pride, or guilt, or a combination of both? "So," I concluded, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone, "while you were all busy running the family business, I was building an empire. The irony isn't lost on me." A stunned silence descended. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. The old narrative was dead. A new one was being written, and I was the author. The aftermath was a whirlwind of forced smiles, hesitant apologies, and opportunistic overtures. Mark, once dismissive, now practically clung to my side, peppering me with questions about synergies and collaborative opportunities. He'd even started wearing a slightly better fitting suit. Chloe, initially speechless, quickly recovered, offering effusive praise and a stream of unsolicited investment advice. She'd become an instant expert on VR/AR technology, spouting jargon she'd clearly just Googled. "Ava, you're such an inspiration," she gushed, conveniently forgetting the years of condescension. My parents, after an initial period of stunned silence, adopted a new, almost cloying tone. My mother, her voice trembling with what I suspected was more fear than pride, offered to help with my personal life. My father, his voice gruff yet softened, suggested we revisit the family firm's investment portfolio. They were clearly calculating the best way to regain lost ground, to re-establish their place in my life and in my newfound wealth. I played the game. I listened to their solicitations, their attempts to ingratiate themselves. I offered vague answers, leaving them dangling, desperate for a piece of the pie. I savored the role reversal, the delicious irony of their scrambling attempts to impress me. I was the one holding the power now, the one deciding who got what. I did offer a few strategic crumbs. I had always valued loyalty, and I had a select group of individuals who had supported me from the beginning, people I could trust. I made sure they were well taken care of. I also quietly funded a scholarship for underprivileged students in my hometown, naming it in honor of my grandmother, the only person who had ever truly believed in me. The attention, however, was exhausting. The constant demands, the endless requests for interviews, the pressure to be a role model. I found myself retreating, seeking solace in the quiet solitude of my Austin loft, away from the clamor and the expectations. There were unexpected challenges. Opportunistic hangers on materialized, drawn by the scent of wealth. I learned to navigate the treacherous waters of social circles, to differentiate between genuine connection and calculated flattery. Some relationships deepened, shedding the weight of pretense, the truth now laid bare. My friendship with my college roommate, Sarah, a fellow artist who had always encouraged my ambition, grew stronger. We had a bond built on mutual respect and unwavering support. She never asked for anything, only offered friendship, and that, I realized, was invaluable. Others fractured under the weight of resentment and envy. Mark, his ego bruised, became increasingly competitive, constantly comparing his achievements to mine. Chloe, unable to accept that she had been outmaneuvered, became bitter and critical. My parents, still trying to regain control, were torn between pride and disappointment. I found myself standing on the balcony of my Austin loft, gazing at the city lights. The sky was a canvas of deep indigo, and the stars twinkled, silent witnesses to my transformation. I thought about the journey, the cost of deception, the intoxicating power of success, the human tendency to underestimate. The years of hidden ambition, the sacrifices, the late nights, and the relentless pursuit of my vision had finally borne fruit. Proving them wrong was a catalyst, but the true reward was proving myself right. The satisfaction of success was tempered by the realization that some wounds ran too deep to heal, some relationships were irrevocably damaged. The final act of the family reunion came to a close. I said my goodbyes, and I left. I drove back to my loft, leaving the family estate. Standing on my balcony, alone with my thoughts, I realized that the legacy I wanted to leave wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about creating something meaningful, something that would endure long after I was gone. I thought about the future, about the possibilities that lay ahead. The future was unknown, uncertain, yet full of potential. I had built an empire, but the journey was far from over. The city lights shimmered below, a vast, glittering tapestry of ambition and opportunity. I was the architect of my own destiny, and I was only just getting started. A quiet satisfaction settled over me, and a strange sense of peace, mixed with a hint of loneliness. The city lights, they were my companions. I stood tall, the quiet architect of my own extraordinary fate. The phone vibrated, a persistent hum against the otherwise silent backdrop of my loft. It was Sarah. "Hey, Ava, you okay? Heard things got interesting at the reunion." "Interesting is one word for it," I replied, the city lights of Austin mirroring in my eyes, more like a Category 5 hurricane. "But I'm okay, just processing." The practical changes were immediate. The constant stream of emails, calls, and requests. My social media had exploded, and everyone wanted a piece of me. The media attention was relentless. I had to hire a full-time assistant just to manage my schedule. I started to crave the solitude I once took for granted. Relationships shifted, warped, and in some cases, shattered. Mark, predictably, became a perpetual shadow, always angling for a collaboration, a partnership, a piece of the action. His attempts at camaraderie felt forced, his compliments hollow. Chloe, on the other hand, oscillated between sycophantic praise and thinly veiled resentment. Her constant questions about my investments and her sudden interest in the tech industry were exhausting. My parents, in their own way, were the most challenging. They offered apologies, sincere or not, and a desperate attempt to rewrite history. My mother, in particular, tried to rekindle the mother-daughter bond, her efforts laced with a desperate need to be a part of my life. My father, ever the pragmatist, made several overtures, subtly suggesting that I consider the family firm for future investments. They had finally realized the error of their ways, but their actions felt more like damage control than genuine contrition. There were positive changes, too. Sarah remained my rock, a constant source of support and a voice of reason in the chaos. Our friendship deepened, a testament to the value of authenticity. I also reconnected with a few college friends who had always believed in my vision, and their simple acts of kindness were invaluable. The biggest surprise? A newfound respect from unexpected corners. Some of my former professors from design school reached out, offering advice and congratulations. Even some of the venture capitalists who had initially dismissed my ideas now eagerly sought my counsel. One afternoon, I was sitting at a coffee shop, trying to work on a new design project, when a young woman approached me. She was a student at the University of Texas, pursuing a degree in computer science. She recognized me from the Forbes article and wanted to ask me about my journey. Her questions were insightful, her passion infectious. She was looking for guidance, for inspiration. It was a humbling reminder of the power of my story, the impact I could have on others. I began to embrace the openness, albeit cautiously. I used my platform to advocate for STEM education, particularly for young women. I started a mentorship program, connecting aspiring entrepreneurs with successful tech leaders. I realized that the true legacy wasn't about wealth or power. It was about using my position to create positive change. But the loneliness lingered. The constant attention, the scrutiny, the pressure to maintain a certain image, it took its toll. I found myself retreating back into the quiet solitude of my loft, seeking refuge from the demands of the world. The apartment was a sanctuary, a space where I could be myself, away from the expectations and the judgments. One evening, months after the reunion, I found myself staring at the same city lights, the same vast, glittering tapestry. The echoes of the past still reverberated. I knew that I would never fully reconcile with my family, that the wounds of the past were too deep. But I had also learned to accept the complexity of our relationship, to understand that their actions were a reflection of their own insecurities and fears. I was starting to see the contours of a new reality, one shaped by both the triumph and the cost of my success. The future was unwritten. The journey was just beginning. I knew that the relationships I forged moving forward would shape the woman I would become. I was ready to start that new chapter, though the past would continue to have influence. I turned from the balcony and looked at the city lights, then to my reflection in the glass. The architect was ready to keep building. The city exhaled a warm, hazy breath as dusk bled into night. Years had passed. The sterling name, once whispered with polite indifference, now carried the weight of expectation, of envy, of possibility. The loft remained, a haven of clean lines and silent contemplation, but the woman who inhabited it was different. She carried the weight of her secret, now a blazing beacon, not a veiled shadow. The empire she'd built wasn't just a collection of companies. It was a testament to unwavering belief, a defiant roar against the chorus of doubt. What was gained? Freedom, yes. The ability to breathe, to be seen, to shape the world with her own hands. Yet the cost was a chilling disconnect. The easy camaraderie, the unburdened joy of shared experience was lost. Family, once a source of frustration, was now a battlefield of carefully calibrated interactions, a constant reminder of the past. The sweet, simple pleasure of being underestimated? Gone, replaced by a suffocating awareness of every word, every gesture, every intention. Success, she learned, was a prism, refracting the light of perception in unpredictable ways. Some saw her as an inspiration, a pioneer, a symbol of female empowerment. Others simply saw a target. Relationships, like the shifting sands of the desert, were constantly in flux, their foundations eroded by the tides of ambition, jealousy, and the corrosive power of unrequited love. The true cost of the secrecy? The years spent hidden, the moments missed, the emotional isolation. The true reward. Knowing she had forged her own path on her own terms, and that in the end, the only validation that mattered was her own. It wasn't the billions, the accolades, or the influence that ultimately defined her. It was the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had dared to defy expectations, to rewrite her own destiny, to build something enduring from nothing but a burning dream. Now, standing on that balcony, the Austin skyline a glittering symphony of lights, Ava Sterling was not the artist, nor the outcast, nor the secret billionaire. She was simply herself. She was the sum of her triumphs and her failures, her betrayals and her redemptions. She was the echo of her own roar. Reader, have you ever felt the sting of being underestimated, the quiet rage of being dismissed? Have you ever dared to dream a dream so audacious, so seemingly impossible, that you were forced to keep it hidden, to build it in the shadows, until the moment you could finally, triumphantly, reveal it to the world? What will you build with your secret?